Hi everyone, we're here today to debunk some of the myths of semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. We see this a lot in voice therapy, and also it's gaining traction in singing as well. And it's pretty technical information, but it's really highly useful. And so we're going to do some practical stuff, but before that we have to understand the science behind it. So let's get started. Before we understand semi-occluded vocal tract, we have to understand how the vocal folds vibrate in the first place. So the vocal folds, the air builds up beneath the closed vocal folds and they kind of burst open from the bottom to the top. And then it changes the pressure differential. Usually there's more pressure below the vocal folds than there is above the vocal folds or in the mouth and outside of the mouth. So it changes the pressure differential, which then kind of creates a vacuum, which makes the vocal folds close again from the bottom to the top because the system is meant to be closed. So what does that look like practically? So if we think about this, here is our vocal folds. This part right here is our vocal folds on both sides. Here the vocal folds are closed, and we can see that the pressure is building up beneath the vocal folds until they burst open, and we can see that the air is flowing through there, and this is a burst of noise. Except now that the air, there's not as much pressure below as there is above, it's more equal. And so that makes a vacuum happen in here for the vocal folds to close from the bottom to the top until the pressure builds up again, the vocal folds burst open from the bottom to the top, the pressure changes, creating that vacuum, and they close again. And it's a cyclical kind of progression for this. So semi-occluded vocal exercises. Is it science or is it a fad? Are we just doing it because it sounds cool and it sounds really interesting? No, it's really science. The goal of semi-occluded vocal fold exercise or semi-occluded vocal tract exercises is to maximize phonatory or voicing efficiency. The partial obstruction of the vocal folds creates kind of a back pressure. And so when we think about that, the back pressure, what that does is it reduces the compression on the vocal folds during vibration or phonation. Just this back pressure is very minimal, but it's there and it's enough to create this very, very small retraction in the vocal folds. Sometimes we call this an abduction, abduction, which means the vocal folds are coming apart a little bit. It's not enough because it's so very small. It's not enough that the vocal folds actually open. It really is just enough that it kind of creates this functional release of muscle tension for the vocal folds, resulting in more efficient vocal fold closure. And isn't that what we want, both in speech and in singing? So the short answer, or the takeaway, is that semi-occluded vocal fold exercise or vocal tract exercises reduce the pressure differential, or the difference in pressure above and below the vocal folds, which really decreases muscle tension. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want reduced muscle tension in all of our voicing. So there is a hierarchy for this. I know there's a whole bunch of exercises out there, but there really is a hierarchy of how we want to progress through this. So the higher resistance, or the more occlusion that we have, the less speech-like it is, but the easier it is, even though it's the most superficial. And as we go through some of these exercises, we get into the lower resistance, the less occlusion, which is more speech-like. So some examples that you see on here, and you see that the research is cited, some of the examples that are on here, we think about lax vox, which you've heard of, or maybe cup bubbles. Cup bubbles with a small straw is the highest level of resistance, so the least like speech or singing, all the way into something like a closed vowel, like an oo or an e, or open vowels, like an ah, and that obviously is most speech-like because it is speech. Those vowels are speech. So when we think about semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, some of the ones that I'll explain today, like we said, the most occluded, or the more pressure above the vocal folds is the least like singing or speech. And the least occluded, or the less pressure above the vocal folds, is the most like speech. So some examples that we have here are lax vox, so cup bubbles. These are going from the most occluded to the least occluded. So we have cup bubbles with a small straw and then a wider straw, or like a smoothie straw. That's going to give you less of an obstruction. Then you have straw phonation, which is just phonating or voicing through the straw. Cup phonation. Lip and teeth fricatives. We'll talk about what that is. It's mostly the V sound. Lip or tongue trills, and then closed vowels. So these are some of the exercises that we're going to look at today and explain what they are, why we use them, and how we can help our speech and singing with them. So the first one, the least amount of, or the most amount of restriction, so the least speech-like, is lax vox or cup bubbles. So what you would do is you put the straw in the water no more than an inch, and then you inhale through your nose and exhale through the straw into the water so that you sustain the bubbles. At first, just make the bubbles so you have the feeling of what exhaling through the straw into the water is going to be like. We were all kids once making milk bubbles, right? Then inhale through the nose and voice through the straw. A lot of times we call this humming, but when we think about humming, really that sound comes through our nose. So we don't want to hum, we want to voice through the straw. So you're going to voice through the straw into the water, and this should still create bubbles. Some tips: hold the straw with your hand, not your teeth, because biting the straw will add muscle tension. So what does this look like? Okay. Here's a regular straw, regular diameter straw, and a cup of water. I place it no more than an inch in there. The deeper you put that in there, the more pressure you're going to get. So we want it no more than an inch into the water. First, we start out, just blow bubbles. Notice I'm holding the straw and I'm not biting it because I don't want to create excess tension in my jaw and lips, because it defeats the purpose of the tension reduction semi-occluded vocal tract exercise. Hold the straw, make sure you have good body alignment, and now voicing. You can sustain a pitch. You can try and do something that's speech-like. So if I said, "How are you today?" You can do that. That's a question. You could also try to do a statement. "I'm fine." Or you could sing a song. And any of those things are working toward that semi-occluded vocal tract with less tension on the vocal folds, because it's easing that pressure differential above and below the vocal folds. Again, I hold the straw at the tip of the water to make sure that it doesn't go farther in. Another tip, make sure that you're taking breaks between these things, because it can make you get a little lightheaded. So what's next? Straw phonation is very similar to lax vox, except that it has less pressure on the outside of the straw because you're not putting it in the water. So the same idea, we inhale through the nose and we exhale through the straw. And again, you can do any of these activities where you just sustain a pitch. You can do sentence with voicing. You can do a question type voicing. It's hard to do speech because obviously you have the straw in your mouth, so you can't articulate, you can't make consonant sounds or vary your vowel sounds because your tongue really isn't moving around the straw. But you can sing the pitches to simple songs like Twinkle Twinkle, Happy Birthday, You Are My Sunshine. Again, you want to hold the straw with your hand and not your teeth because we don't want to create any more tension in the system. And again, you want to take some rest breaks here because the more you're breathing, sometimes you might feel a little lightheaded. So again, what does that look like? Same straw. How are you today? I'm fine. Notice when I do that, I'm not stopping the sound. It's constant phonation. So we don't want to use the vocal folds to stop the sound or use a glottal attack, for instance. Because that's slamming the vocal folds together and creating tension. So again, we want one continuous sound. That's straw phonation. What's next? Cup phonation. Cup phonation uses a styrofoam cup, 8-ounce sized, and you put a pencil-sized hole in the bottom of it. You cover your mouth and your nose, or you cover your mouth but not your nose. Notice in the picture, her mouth is covered, but her nose is not covered. And she's creating a seal right here around her lips. And the seal is really important because we're creating that occlusion in the vocal tract above the vocal folds. And so this is nice because you can actually do some articulation within the cup. This is less occlusion, and you can feel that if you go through the progression of these exercises, you can feel each exercise has less occlusion than the exercise before. So what does that look like? Here's my cup. There's my hole. It does not have to be in the center. I'm covering my mouth, but not my nose. And I can say words. Hi, bye. My name is Jamie Claire. Simple sentences, phrases, or even singing. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. And you can sing into the cup. It does get a little hot in there, so it's good to take breaks with this too. This is a good carryover exercise for speech and singing because you can try and alternate. How are you today? How are you today? And keep the feeling or that muscle tension free feeling of your vocal folds from the semi-occluded in the cup to out of the cup. What's next? Here's a very interesting phrase. Labiodental fricatives. What? What is that? Well, if we break that up into what the word is, labio refers to your lips and dental refers to your teeth. So a labiodental fricative is a sound that you make with your lips on your teeth. So like a V sound, you bite your bottom lip. Your teeth are on your lips. Labiodental fricative. A fricative is a sound, it's a speech sound that has continuous sound with restricted airflow. So it's not like an open vowel sound. The air is continuous, so it's not like a B. You can't sustain a B, right? And it stops. Try that with me. Nope, you can't stop. It's a stopped consonant, so you can't sustain it. But a V, you could hold forever. But there's restriction in that airflow. That's what a fricative sound is. So, a lip and teeth fricative is the V sound, and we can do this with lots of things. So you can just sustain a V. You can do pitch slides with V. You can do V plus a vowel. V, va, vo. And by sustaining that V sound before you open into the vowel, you're preparing your voice to maintain that muscle tension-free sound and with that semi-occluded vocal tract. You can also do sentences, the pitch of sentences with the V sound. So if I were to say, how are you today? Or you could sing a short little song on the V sound. This does tickle your lip a little bit because the air is flowing so fast past your teeth and your lip. So it may make your lip tickle. So you may have to stop and itch. Okay. Now this is even less occluded than the cup. And the next one we're pretty familiar with as singers, but when we do voice therapy, we also use this strategy because it's a more open vocal tract. So there's less occlusion in the vocal tract when we do a lip trill or a tongue trill. Make sure when we're doing that lip trill, we're using those big floppy lips with no tension in the cheeks or the jaw or the lips. So just big floppy muscles right there. And the benefit of a tongue trill is really so that, or tongue trill being raspberries or the rolled R sound. So, but it avoids clenching the teeth and then again putting jaw tension when we're trying to avoid muscle tension in the system. So what are some activities we can do with that? We can do, again, sustained pitches on a lip trill or a tongue trill. We can do sentence voicing again. We can do question voicing again, or simple songs. So a lot of the activities are similar, but the change really is the amount of occlusion in the vocal tract. We're getting more and more speech-like as we move through the progression. So, I know, it looks silly and it feels silly, but it works. So the lip trill, you can just big floppy lips, big floppy cheeks. Pitch glides, I usually start at the middle and move down because our speech is always in our chest voice. Most of the time we speak in our chest voice, so our chest voice is typically more warmed up than our head voice, so always going down first. And then going up. And coming back to the neutral when you do a pitch glide. Again, you can do those sentence voicings or those question voicings or simple songs. Same thing with a tongue trill. Again, it feels kind of silly, but it works the same way. You can't clench your teeth because your tongue is literally between your teeth. So this is a very good one for those of you who are who have muscle tension in your teeth or you have TMJ. It's good to do this one instead of the lip trilling one because you can clench your teeth in a lip trill. And the same exercises apply. And again, it's more speech-like and there's more air flowing through the system. And last but not least, we have our closed vowels. Closed vowels being oo or e. Again, we're doing the same kinds of things, sustaining pitches. So ooh, again, trying to make sure we're not creating too much tension in here. And if you're feeling that tension starting to happen in your lips because it is a closed vowel, start with a lip trill and go into it. You hear how that changes the sound from when I just start out with an oo. It's because I released some of that muscle tension. Same thing with an e. Versus e. There's a little bit more tension when you just start out with the e. So starting out with the lip trill goes from a more occluded system to a less occluded system. So it helps release some of that muscle tension. And that's semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. The science is real, the exercises are real, and they work. So try them.